Of all the careers that you could have chosen and all the things you could have studied, why did you choose law?
Well, that's a good question. When I did my leaving certificate in 1965, we had just seen the introduction of wheat quotas, and the wool prices were at an all-time low. So living on the land wasn't a terribly good future to look forward to, and I had 5 brothers and sisters. So given all of that, my father and mother decided that perhaps it might be good to look at doing something other than being a farmer. And so the only other things that I had an interest in were history and law. So, and the two, as I've discovered, are very related, so I sort of fell into it. And my father was very friendly with one of the local solicitors in the town, and we went and saw him, and he explained a bit about what the law was as a practice of a profession. And he had some contacts in Sydney, and I was lucky enough to obtain articles of clerkship with the firm that he was with, that was TressCox. So I've been with the one firm all my career.
A long time.
Mm.
You've had some real milestones in that career. You've been the president of the LCA and the Law Society of New South Wales.
Yes, I was first president of the Law Society of New South Wales, then I went on to be the president of the Law Council of Australia, and then the real highlight was being president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. They were all highlights, and I have to say, terrific experiences. But the thing that really was an unbelievable experience was being president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, meeting lawyers all around the world, getting very involved in rule of law issues, and what I call the Commonwealth principles, that is the set of principles for governance of countries, which were established way back in the 1990s at Latimer House. They sometimes referred to as the Latimer House principles. But that also led to a lot of other wonderful experiences. I met, some of the best legal minds in the world, and also some of the legal practitioners. But I think the really interesting stuff I did was some of the amicus briefs that we became involved in when I was president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association, relating to Guantanamo Bay and the briefs we filed with the US Supreme Court.
Okay, can you tell me a bit more about that? Because I read mainly about your involvement with capital punishment and homosexuality and AIDS and HIV and those sorts of issues that are tied up with the rule of law.
Yeah. The first brief we filed had to do with the writ of habeas corpus, that is a right of a prisoner to be called to trial, and the US Supreme Court, notwithstanding that the military tribunals had been set up, agreed with our submissions that the people that were imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay were subject to the old-fashioned writ of habeas corpus, although it didn't do them much good because the US government found out ways of slowing it all down. But we filed 5 briefs in all, and I think in the end our persistence and the persistence of a lot of other people led to a lot of people being ultimately released from Guantanamo Bay. A lot of people were held who shouldn't have been held. A lot of people were now, it's well known, were subjected to torture. What I found very disappointing in the first few years when I travelled to the US to speak about it was that because the President said it was a good idea, all the US lawyers, there was practically no one in the US that had a bad word to say about Guantanamo Bay. Now, we know all of that changed significantly as the years went by and people realised what was really going on there. But it can show you how fragile the rule of law is.
Ron, your persistence on the issue of AIDS and HIV and homosexuality, capital punishment, you put those things on the agenda in your time as president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. Yeah. Did you face much opposition at the time?
Initially, yes. On the more difficult topic of homosexuality and HIV, AIDS, etc., and LGBT rights in general, that was a much more difficult task for the CLA because thanks to old British laws, the anti-buggery laws and other laws that were transported with colonialism to the colonies. I think something like 40 odd countries still have those laws around the Commonwealth, and there's a lot of resistance in the developing Commonwealth countries to those laws being repealed. So it was with a lot of difficulty that I decided we couldn't get a policy. What I decided was that we could get a discussion going and at least get it on the table. So we sought to do that, and we once again at the Hong Kong conference. And I think one of the big things about why we did manage to get a discussion going is because Michael Kirby gave a paper at the Hong Kong conference which was just outstanding. And he walked into a packed auditorium of people who were ready to attack him, and he had a prepared speech which he threw away, as only Michael can do, and he walked down from the podium and stood in the doorway to stop people walking out, effectively. And then he gave this outstanding address, which was a very scholarly address on the history of the laws and why those laws were a bad thing. And by the end of the discussion or presentation he did, even those who were probably still not convinced were at least respectful of his views. So that was something that'll live with me for a long time. But the impact of that on the Commonwealth Lawyers Association's Council was also very significant, and it allowed us to issue a statement about it.
And Ron, how effective do you think the Australian government has been in the last 10 years in improving the rule of law in this country?
Well, look, we are marvellously privileged in this country to live in a democracy which is truly a democracy. I have reservations about certain things that happen from time to time within government. I think we need to be aware that there has been a transference of government to the executive, and the executive power is encroaching on our democratic rights, and I think we will need in the future to be very careful about that. You know, prime ministers and premiers and cabinets all want to control things, and with the amount of spin doctoring that they want to put on things and what the press puts on, we do see this, you know, concentration of power within a small group in an effort to control what goes on. So we don't see the free debate that we used to see, and I think we need to be on our guard. Australians don't appreciate just how fragile democracy is. In this country, we would not stand for a coup by the army to take over and run the country, but you know, within the Commonwealth, there are countries where coups happen from time to time with some regularity. You've only got to look at Fiji, for one example. Got to look at what's happening in Sri Lanka at the moment, what's happening in Zimbabwe. You look around the Commonwealth, you know, there are, you know, democracy is prevailing, and there's been some great steps made, particularly in some of the African Commonwealth countries. But I think the future, we always need to be on our guard.
Ron Heinrich, thanks so much for your time today. It was great to get your insights and hear about your wonderful career in the law.
Well, it's been a great privilege. Thank you.
Thanks.